All right, so up until now, we've been deep inside the engine room of capital, right? We've been tracing the abstract laws of its accumulation. But now, we have to step back and ask a question that the logic itself just can't answer. You see, the entire system we've been analyzing, it assumes a certain starting point, a world that's already divided. So the question is, how did that world come to be? We're about to pivot from the logic of the system to the very real and very violent history of its birth.
Think about it. Every model, every law we've discussed, it takes for granted that these two key players already exist: the capitalist, who owns things, and the wage laborer, who has to work for them. But this is the critical question. Where did they come from? What was the actual historical process that created this fundamental split in society in the first place?
You see, the whole logical structure of capital that we've so carefully explored, well, it all stands on a very specific social foundation. Let's take a moment to make that foundation perfectly explicit. And here it is. This is the fundamental precondition, the starting assumption for absolutely everything, a polarized market. On one side, you've got the owners of money, of machinery, of land, and on the other, you have free laborers. Now, Marx wants us to pay very close attention to that word free, because it's got a double meaning. Workers are free to sell their labor to any employer they choose, but they are also freed from any other way of surviving. They have no land, no tools, nothing to live on except the wage they can earn. So, how did this polarization happen? Well, before Marx, political economy had a rather convenient story to tell, a moralizing little tale. Marx, with a bit of irony, calls it an idyllic fairy tale.
And this narrative, which probably sounds a little familiar even today, goes something like this. Long ago, there were two types of people. You had the hardworking, smart, thrifty folks, and then you had the lazy ones, the ones who spent everything they had. Naturally, the first group got rich, and the second group, well, they ended up with nothing left to sell but their own ability to work. It basically frames our whole economic system as a natural outcome of personal character.
But here's the thing. Marx argues that this story, for all its moral neatness, has a massive logical flaw. It conveniently leaves out the most important part of the real historical process.
And this is where the whole fairy tale just collapses under a little bit of scrutiny. Okay, maybe it explains how one person could get wealthy. Fine. But what it absolutely cannot explain is the creation of the other class, the huge population of people who have nothing to sell but their ability to work. Where did they all come from? This isn't a story about a few individual failures. It's a story of mass dispossession that the fairy tale just completely ignores. And this brings us right to the core of chapter 26. Marx is now going to pull back the curtain and reveal what he calls the secret of this original, or as he calls it, primitive accumulation. Okay, this definition is the absolute heart of the argument. This is not the accumulation that comes from surplus value, the process we've been studying. This is the accumulation that came before it. Primitive accumulation is the historical process that creates the conditions for capitalism to even begin. It is simply the divorce of the producer from their means of production.
So contrary to that nice fairy tale about diligent savers and lazy spenders, this process of separating people from their land and their tools was anything but peaceful. It wasn't voluntary. It was a process of conquest, enslavement, robbery, and murder.
Marx's language here is just unforgettable. He insists that this history is written in the annals of mankind in letters of blood and fire. And we have to understand, he is not just being poetic here. This isn't a metaphor for a tough time. He means this literally. This is his description of the violent expropriation that created the modern working class. So, what does this violent transformation actually do? What does it accomplish? Well, Marx argues it has two inseparable sides, two outcomes of a single historical movement. And it is so crucial that we understand these are not two separate histories. The very same process that concentrates the land and the tools into the hands of one class is the exact same one that strips the producers of those things. You cannot have one without the other. The creation of the capitalist and the creation of the wage laborer are two results of the exact same act of historical expropriation. So, the secret is out. The foundation of our economic system isn't thrift, it's theft. It's not about individual virtue, it's about mass expropriation. And that leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. If this history is written in blood and fire, where and on whom did the first blow fall? Well, that is precisely where Marx takes us next.